Today, I am answering a question that I have been asked quite a few times now, and that is, do I feel safe as a solo woman living abroad in Italy? So stay tuned because I'm going to talk all about this very important question. Hello, friends. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Bianca. I am a single woman who bought a cheap house on the island of Sardinia, and this is where I now live. Kind of a little bit like this background. Kind of, not really. Today, I have tea and I have some local delicacies that I'm going to be potentially eating while I talk to you today. But seriously, have you seen some of the sweet, beautiful biscotti that they have in Sardinia? Like, these are not only beautiful looking, well, I actually don't have any idea how they taste. This is going to be the first time that I try them, but oh my gosh, like seriously, this one looks like an ice cream. I don't know, are these like mushrooms? One with coconut, chocolate and coconut. They're so fun. They're so gorgeous. I have no doubt they are very delicious. But let's get back to the topic at hand after I have a bite of this one. Should I dip it in my tea? I feel like I should dip it in my tea. It's so good. It's so good. It's chocolate, it's jam, it's more chocolate. It's very, very good. This is how I feel when I eat delicious biscottis in Italy. Homemade, Sardinia. You got to come just to try these. Anyway, back to the topic. Do I feel safe here in Italy? So, I actually have a lot of experience. I believe I have a lot of experience to be able to answer this question. And why do I say that? Because I've lived abroad a whole bunch. I've also done a lot of traveling. I probably haven't shared too much about it. I think I've mentioned that I lived in China. But the very first overseas trip I took was actually with my family when I was 15. We went to Bali. And it is actually that trip, I believe, that sparked this love of adventure and travel in me. It was all because of what my mum said to me. So I went to school one day and I told my friends that I was going to Bali for a holiday, and I was so excited because I was going overseas for the first time. And I'd seen pictures of the resort and things like that, and I was so excited to experience that. And I had one friend that turned to me and she said, "You don't want to go to Bali. Bali is disgusting. Bali is dirty and it has loads of sleazy people, and you just don't want to go there." And I went home feeling very disheartened after I heard that. And I said to my mom, "Mom, I don't think I'm coming to Bali." And she said, "Okay, all right, do you want to tell me why?" And I said to her, "Well, this is what my friend told me." And she said, yeah, I can see why your friend might have felt that way. And you can choose to think of it that way, or you can see it as Bali's not dirty, it's a developing country, and they have some differences in the way they're managing things like trash, and they're doing their best and they're trying to keep things as clean as possible, but it's just not the same as how we do it here in Australia. I thought, okay, yeah, I get that. And then she said, and when it comes to the people, she said, yeah, you could think of them as sleazy if you want to, but she's like, I've been there a lot myself, and my experiences have been that the people are really friendly. They want to get to know you. They love our white skin because it's different to theirs, and they're curious. So they want to get to know you. They want to spend time with you. And that was my first lesson that I'm like super aware of as highlighting the importance of changing your perspective when it comes to things. I really, really, really didn't learn that lesson deeply until about 4 years ago. But I took so much away from that experience to Bali, and it just lit up something inside of me that travel was what I wanted to do in my life. When I was 17, I had the opportunity to live abroad in Italy for a year. It was supposed to be with my family. I stayed with my family for part of that time, and then for the rest of the time, I kind of went traveling. It was guided by my parents, where they were kind of like, okay, how about go here next, and then go here with more family, and go here. And I was really blessed that they were so accommodating and so flexible that they supported my needs, because I wasn't being supported and cared for in the way that I needed when I first arrived at my family's place. And not to judge or anything like that, they dealt with the situation as best as they knew how, but it was challenging. So it was really great that my parents could move me around. But what that meant is that I, as this young woman, had to be solo traveling and figuring out how to use my intuition, how to read people, how to understand when I was safe and when I wasn't safe, and to try to figure out how to take care of myself in that environment. So I do believe that I have quite a lot of experience because, like I said, I've kept traveling so much since then, and I've lived abroad several times. So while the question might be, do you feel safe living abroad in Italy? I really think that the question is, can you follow your intuition and know how to keep yourself safe when you travel abroad? So the other places that I lived abroad was Naples in Italy, well, just slightly outside of the city. I have lived in London, in South London, mostly, Clapham, Wandsworth area. I have lived in Austria. I did 2 winter seasons living/working in this town, which is essentially a ski town. And then, as you probably know, I spent 5 years living in China. And then now I'm living in Sardinia. So I do have a fair amount of experience living in different places, some places very big, some places small, and I've also traveled a bunch as well. I've traveled through some parts of the US. I have been to not a lot, but a part of Mexico, and to many parts of Asia, and of course around Australia, my home country. So I do feel like I have quite a lot of experience being a solo female traveler. So let's talk about the places that I felt the least safe. I felt the least safe in London, parts of the US, and Napoli. Not entirely, but it was like my spidey senses came on and were just like, you need to practice some caution here. So I personally believe that wherever you go in the world, there's a potential for danger. Now, as a woman, the danger comes from, sadly, but truly, from men. It's the threat of being taken advantage of. And then, of course, all the same threats that happen to anyone, like being mugged, robbed, murdered, abducted, all of those things, they're all in the back of someone's mind. But I do believe that this is probably heightened in the back of a woman's mind, especially if she's traveling solo. She usually will be a little bit more aware of what is happening around her because she doesn't have anyone protecting her like she should. Whether it's traditional to think this way or not, I do believe that women should be protected by men. And I believe that women should feel safe because they have the protection of the men. That is my personal feeling about how society should operate, is that women should not feel unsafe because we should have all of these incredible men who stand up for us and look out for us at all times. And I think that when you get into community with people, that's what starts to happen. You start having those people standing up for you, being there for you, protecting you, if you have a really solid community that you belong to. However, when you travel, that's a little bit different because you haven't yet formed that. And even when you live somewhere for a period of time, if you don't integrate with the community, you don't have that community around you. So you do have to be careful. And that's where your intuition, and as a woman, you have a very strong one, so trust it. If you have a sense that a person is not safe, you've got to follow that. You've got to distance yourself, but do it in a calm way so nobody knows that you're freaking out. You're just being careful. You're just taking care of you. Now, in London, I had heard a bunch of stories about how unsafe London was. In fact, as a new teacher, I taught a little bit in London at an international school, but I decided to not take on a role as a sub-teacher, a substitute teacher, because I'd heard about the children in the schools and how it wasn't uncommon for them to be very disrespectful to the teachers. I don't know how true that is, but I chose not to take on that role because I didn't want to experience that. So knowing that that was potentially how the schools were, and then I also heard a lot about being very careful at nighttime, not traveling. Like if you got onto a bus, the double-decker buses, to not go up to the top if you're alone at nighttime, but to stay down on the ground level where the bus driver is, because that way at least you are being seen by the bus driver, and that might provide a little bit more protection for you. I also witnessed a personal attack on two people that I was with in London, and one of those people ended up in the hospital with serious damage to their head. So I obviously, naturally, had a heightened sense of awareness, particularly at nighttime, when I was walking around the suburbs of London. So if I got a bus home and I had to walk from the bus or the train to my house, I would walk very quickly, keys in hand. So definitely experienced that feeling of being unsafe in London. When I went to the US, I was in Washington, D.C. and around the Maryland area because that is where my brother lives. Now, at the time when I went there, he very clearly communicated to me his fears. Now, my brother also has experienced violence in the US personally. He has had attacks. And because of that, he made it very clear to me that I needed to be careful and I needed to be aware at all times of where I was and who was around me. And it didn't matter for him whether it was the daytime or the nighttime. It would be in very crowded places sometimes that he would get very nervous, like at a train station after a basketball game, something like that. I could see that he was visibly on edge in that experience, and that made me feel cautious as well. I really had no idea what to expect. I didn't know if he was overreacting, but that was obviously something he definitely transferred onto me and communicated with me. I remember, in fact, when we drove through Baltimore, he said there was one particular area where you do not go. And I made a joke about, oh, let's just drive through there. And he's like, you would be mad to do that. I couldn't even fathom that that existed in the world, because that does not exist in Australia, that you can't drive down a street for fear of your life. It just blows my mind that there exist places like that in the world. Then in Napoli, I felt unsafe only once. And that was when I was in a car with a local guy and some of my friends. And a similar experience to the one I just explained about Baltimore is that all of a sudden, I just remember hearing him say, everybody lock the doors, roll up the windows now. And I just remember thinking, holy shit, what is going on? And he just very quickly explained that he had accidentally, somehow, unintentionally driven down the wrong street and found himself in a part of the neighborhood that was undesirable. And he was like, we have to get the F out of here now. So it was doors locked, windows up, everybody was quiet and he drove as fast as he could to get out. Again, blows my mind that those places even exist. Now, the other Napoli experience that I had, which had no direct impact on me, but it was a story that I had heard. My sister and I were staying in a hostel in Napoli. This was before I lived there. And this South African girl stumbled into the room and she was visibly upset and she didn't have anything with her. And she asked for help. She asked for money. Then she proceeded to tell us why she was asking for money. And she said, I cannot believe it. I am from South Africa where there is so much crime. Another place I haven't ever wanted to go to after she told me that story, because I didn't know that about South Africa. And she said, I took an overnight train. I didn't sleep very much. I got to Napoli train station. I sat down. I was so tired and I just fell asleep at the train station. She said, I woke up and all of my stuff was gone. She's like, I cannot believe I made such a fatal mistake when I know better, because I come from a place like that and I just didn't think that would happen. And now here I am with no stuff. So, like I said, it didn't happen to me directly, but it definitely impacted on my feelings about, okay, what is this place? What is going on here? And how safe am I here? So in those places that I just described to you, in London, in the US, and in Napoli, my spidey senses were kind of heightened. But when I was in certain places, you just feel the energy that's there. And if the energy feels good, feels safe, then, you feel good, you feel safe, you go with that. It's as soon as things change that you just have to be very aware of that in yourself and make decisions to position yourself so that you are safe. I think it's time to try another biscuit. I love coconut, so let's go with this one here. Shall I dip? I'll dip. And they're all just so good. Coconut makes this one. I'm drinking rooibos tea. Has anyone had rooibos tea before? It's really delicious. And it's caffeine free. All right, so despite all of those spidey senses of mine being up when I was traveling in those places, I must say I have been very protected. I have felt very safe in most situations when I have been traveling. I've put myself in some pretty dangerous, silly situations in some cases. I've put myself alone with certain individuals that could have taken advantage of me but didn't. And I have also put myself in some dangerous situations, like in fast cars with people who weren't super sober. One literally did a head nod at the wheel one time and I had to wake him up. So I have been protected in many, many ways, I have no doubt. But I really do think why women ask the question, do you feel safe, is because women have, like I said before, they have a need to feel safe, because if they don't have anyone protecting them, they have to do it on their own. And that's very, very hard. I mean, no woman is stronger than a man. It's just science. It's just anatomy. It's just the way it is. Men are stronger than women. So we naturally have to protect ourselves if we are alone. And that is why women carry mace and their keys between their fingers and things like that. The other thing I also think is valid is that women have a lot of generational and ancestral trauma. And I really do believe that this is inherited or just built into our cells, that for centuries, women have been marginalized and oppressed. And when you have that sort of history that is literally inside of our cells, and our cells are reminding us when we are feeling unsafe or when we could be potentially going to a place where we could be unsafe, they are signaling to us to be careful. So I think that's why women will frequently ask the question, do you feel safe there? how could you do that alone? Do you feel safe? It does require you to be brave to travel on your own. That is for sure. It requires you to be cautious. It requires you to be intelligent. It requires you to pay attention to details that maybe if someone was there with you, you would not pay attention to. Women have an instinct to scan the room to see who is there, to see, is there a threat to my life here? I'm not saying that men don't do that as well, but I do believe, at least for myself, I know that that is true, that I will definitely look to see who is in the space that I'm in and am I safe? So I do get, ladies, why those people who have reached out to me asking, do you feel safe traveling alone abroad or living in Italy or in specifically Sardinia, why you have asked that question. So that's why I wanted to address it today. And I will add that living in Melbourne, while I felt safe most of the time there, I lived in Melbourne for 13, 14 years, and I lived in the same house pretty much the entire time. And it was off this really popular street called Chapel Street. I lived in the suburb of Windsor. So if anyone's familiar with that area, there's South Yarra, there's Paran, there's Windsor. And I used to party a lot. I used to go out. I used to come home in the very early hours of the morning. As I was walking up my street, while nothing ever happened, I always had my keys in hand and I always felt myself walking/running to get to my front door. And that didn't always happen. It didn't happen at the beginning. It happened after people started talking about men who were preying on women. And I was starting to hear more and more about these stories coming out, and that created fear in me. And as a result, I was feeling that fear in those times when I was alone and in the dark. So they're the places where I had some feelings of unsafety happening. Unsafety, is that a word? A lack of safety. The safest places that I have lived in so far, the first one was Shanghai in China. I went out a bunch in China, would come home late sometimes too. Never once did I feel scared to live in China. A place with 30 million people, my spidey senses rarely went off, rarely. I'm trying to remember of when they came on. Never did I ever feel scared on the streets of Shanghai. Never. I also mentioned that I lived in Austria. I never felt unsafe in Austria. I was in a very little place, but never felt unsafe there. And then really any other small towns that I traveled to, I have not felt unsafe. So that brings me to the place that I live in now. For those of you who haven't checked out other videos and cottoned on to the name of the place where I live, it's called Novi. Novi is in the northern west part of Sardinia. It's about 20 minutes from the city of Sassari. I feel very safe here. Very safe here. When I walked through Sassari the other day, and if you haven't checked out my video on Sassari, you can go and do that. I felt very safe in Sassari. Now, granted, I have not walked around at nighttime in Sassari. I do not know how that would feel because I haven't had that experience, but I have walked around a lot at nighttime here, and I have felt very safe. The other night, I was walking down the street, and there were 3 big young men who walked past me. And in another situation, in another city, country, place, there is the potential for that to feel threatening as a woman. Now, wherever I go, I will always be respectful and friendly and smile and say hello. I did exactly the same with these young men. And I will say that the young men here are very respectful. The people here, when you greet them, if there's a little bit of a gray area with time here, but in the morning it's buongiorno. In the afternoon/evening/night, it's buonasera. Buonasera can start from like 2 p.m. So I don't even know. It's like good night, good evening. but it's like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's all very confusing. Some people will just directly say ciao or salve. Sometimes I take my cue from them and respond with however they greeted me. And sometimes I just chuck out a buongiorno, buonasera, salve, and we're all good. And what I've found is these young boys, young men, they all do the same. Young girls, young ladies. The people here are so incredibly friendly. And if anything, they are shy, curious, but shy. I remember when I was traveling through Florence, I have had people walk up to me and just stop and say, "Oh my God, you're really pretty," or something random like that. And "Where are you from?" and start talking to me and then potentially invite me out. Now, spidey senses definitely go up in that situation, because when a man walks up to you, tells you you're beautiful, and then asks you out or for your number, not usually something that I respond with a "sure, I'll do that," even though it's flattering. And he's usually charming and beautiful himself. So you could always have a wild experience with that person. It could also be kind of stupid. But I digress. Here in this town of Novi, the people are just gorgeous. I have not felt unsafe once, and I have felt that way anywhere I have traveled to in this place so far. I will say that there is a lot that I haven't seen, but I still continue to feel safe. And so often I will pass young people, even these 3 young men that walked past me that were like towering over me, which is weird because a lot of the men here are quite short. And they were just like, "Buonasera." And it's such a polite greeting. It still throws me to hear that sort of language out of young men or young women. Often in the country that I come from, they would either ignore you. So basically, single ladies, if you're wanting to move to Italy, the smaller towns are a really safe bet, I personally feel. And of course, all of this comes from my own personal experience, my own connection to my own intuition, and my belief that I just have to keep trusting my gut, trusting my intuition, that if a person feels unsafe, I have to trust that to be the right choice for me, and to just not continue or be in their presence for longer than I need to be. So I think it's pretty simple in terms of that. Have another little biscuit break. I have a feeling this one has choc chips in it. Kind of looks like choc chips, right? Some people might think it's so gross to dunk, but I love it. Much more simple. Choc chips. So good. They're buttery. I love butter. So since I have moved here, one thing that has been really noticeable but to me from the very beginning is how many men there are, and how the men are everywhere. They're out on the street, they're sitting at the bar, they're walking down the street. It's more men everywhere than there are women. They're outdoors all the time, and they're often in groups with their friends, just hanging out. The women, however, are not. So I have to assume, because I know for every man there is likely a woman, so I have to assume that she is inside. I have to assume that she is with family in the house, doing some sort of family duties. Maybe she's spending time with her friends inside rather than out. And I won't lie, this was really strange for me at first. And walking down the street every day in this town is something that has been something I've had to get used to, because walking down the street, I'm stared at by everybody. Everyone notices me, and everyone wants to say hello to me, or look at me, or smile at me, or wave at me. Or if they know me, call my name, come and talk to me. But literally every single day, if I leave my house, people look at me. I can feel it and I can see it and I experience it. And I could get upset about it, but everything is perspective, right? Like the story I told at the beginning, I can also have the same perspective here. The people are curious about new people. And I think even for those people who aren't looking, on a whole, the Sardinian people tend to be very curious people. They want to get to know other people, the lives of other people, what it's like to have the life of another person. And I know this because when I do sit and talk to these people, they ask me a lot of questions about my life. So because people know that I'm a resident here now, I do get a lot of people coming up to me or just a lot of people staring. So, I'll go past a bar, there'll be a lot of men sitting outside in the sun having a beer, and literally everybody stops and looks at me as I walk past. And so I have to make the choice to either say, buongiorno, buonasera, salve, ciao. They will all say it back to me and they will continue watching until I've gone. And then they'll go back to their beers or their conversations. Or sometimes it'll be them initiating and they'll see me and they'll be like, hi. Sometimes it'll be under their breath. I've heard some people, because I don't typically look like a Sardinian person, where they'll sort of whisper and go, that's the Australian girl. Or isn't she beautiful? Or something like that, which is incredibly flattering and something that makes me a little uncomfortable, but it is what it is. Just the other day, I had a man who I had met at this event one night. And so a couple of days ago, I was walking down the street with a friend and I hear this man call out, is that Bianca? And he ran up all the way to us, which was like across the street and down the road, just to say hi. These are the kind of people that you meet in small towns. They want to get to know you. They're curious. They're friendly, like so friendly. And it's an absolute joy to get to know the people more and more each day, even though they all still stare. They all have good hearts, I'm sure, most of them. So yes, I feel very safe in this environment. And because I feel safe in this environment, it does allow you to let your guard down. But remember, ladies, we have to have our spidey senses on. And I have had one situation here in this town. I thought that someone was harmless, and in the end, they overstepped the line in terms of their desires. I was very shocked that that occurred, that I, in this particular situation, had actually trusted that person. And so naturally in that situation, I had to act according to my needs to not be in that space anymore and left very abruptly. So again, like I said before, you have to listen to those instincts when they kick in. In that situation, they didn't kick in immediately because that person had been so nice, so friendly, so accommodating, so helpful up until a certain point. And then for whatever reason, that changed. And you have to be paying attention for those types of situations. And that's really unfortunate. It's very unfortunate that women have to live their life like this, but we do. And no, there was no harm done. I was not touched, hurt, or anything like that. And that is simply because I was able to become very aware and exit from that situation as soon as I recognized it wasn't where I wanted to be. Because of cultural differences, it is hard to know sometimes what the situation is that you find yourself in. Men here in Italy are totally different to what I'm familiar with in Australia. In Australia, I kind of think men are a little afraid of women, if I'm honest. I feel like sometimes a woman has to approach the man to talk to him because they're lacking in confidence to be able to do it themselves. Maybe because they've been turned down so many times. Maybe because women can be very outspoken and there is a fear of rejection there. So it's only when guys in Australia are feeling extra confident for whatever reasons, or they're just naturally an outgoing person, that they will approach a woman. And in fact, sometimes it's actually quite hard to get a man's attention in Australia. So here has been a very, very different situation for me. I have found that, for example, with Facebook, I am getting lots of friend requests from men and almost none from women. It's only really been people who have had close connections with and conversations with that they will ask me for friendship through Facebook. But literally any man in this town, whether I have seen him in person or he has seen me, but I've never spoken to him before, I don't know at all who he is, will ask me for friendship on Facebook. And I'm one of those people that don't accept friends unless I know them, generally speaking. But coming to this town, I have felt like it was necessary, not necessary, but it was better for me to choose to accept that friendship rather than not, because I'm in a small town. But I also figure that because it's online, there is that literal boundary that you're behind a computer screen, so you don't have to have that confrontation in person. If they overstep the line, you can unfriend them, ignore them, block them, whatever. And I've had to do that to a couple of people because they have incessantly messaged me, tried calling me over and over again, sent me very random messages, sent me messages when that were a little bit inappropriate, not very inappropriate, but just like messages to say goodnight or something like that, when I know that these people have wives as well. And that makes me feel uncomfortable. If someone sends me a friend request now, I will look at their profile. And if they don't have a profile picture of themselves, I won't accept their friendship. And if I have a sense that they're okay because they're connected to a lot of my other friends, and I could therefore go and ask them, who is this person? Then I might accept. And if they start sending me some crazy messages, then I will just immediately block them. The internet is a strange place, right? It allows people to be very different from how they would likely be in person. One more biscuit break before I finish this video. I had to go for this one because this one looks tasty. I mean, it's like, who doesn't love jam in a biscuit? I was right. Very good. I think any biscuit with jam in it is gotta be like my favorite. Again, it's buttery. It's sweet from the icing sugar and probably all the sugar in the biscuit. I think the first one was my favorite though. The one with the chocolate and the jam and the chocolate. But that was good. So the last thing I wanted to mention was crime and things like drugs, because I think that's another thing that can potentially make a person feel unsafe. Now, as you're probably aware, there are drugs everywhere. Before I came to Sardinia, I met a man. He was actually from Sardinia, from a place not too far from here. And he communicated to me that there has been some drug problems here, drugs like cocaine. On the scale of drug problems, what that looks like for Italy. I come from a small country town, and drug problems in my small country town are not great. They're ice kind of bad. Recently seen footage of people in San Francisco on the streets because of fentanyl. Those types of drugs I don't see as being remotely a problem here. The one drug that I regularly smell and appreciate, I won't lie, I like the smell, is marijuana. But are the drugs causing crime and causing problems? I don't know of any crime that has happened here. People frequently leave their front doors open here. I frequently leave my front window open. I really don't see the dangers personally happening here in this country. I do not feel unsafe. And like I said, if there are moments where I do, then I get out of that situation. But I have not felt that there is a risk of my safety here as a single woman. I have not heard of cars being broken into. I have not heard of houses being broken into. But I'm sure that if you speak to locals, if their focus is on the negative, they will make the comment that yes, it's a problem. I don't think it's a problem at all. Nobody has cameras at their front doors, like is happening more and more all around the world. So from that perspective, I think it's safe to say that people feel pretty good here. And obviously everybody walks around at nighttime. There are no issues here. Everybody knows one another. And I think that's a big difference. When you have a community where people know one another, if somebody's going to do something, everybody's going to know who that person is. So yes, there is always a chance of altercations between people because people don't always get along. But in terms of crime, I don't think that there are any concerns. Definitely not in this little town. I have no doubt that in the city, there is going to be more of a chance of that happening, especially if there are people that are homeless. From that perspective, you can expect that where there are people who are suffering, there are going to be higher chances of crime. But in terms of drugs and crime, I don't see that as a problem. In terms of general crime, I don't see that as a problem as well. But I also think another thing that's important for you ladies to consider as well is, can I actually create a feeling of safety within myself? Because like I said, perspective is everything. If you walk around in this world thinking that you are going to be harmed, that there is danger at every turn, that there is a possibility of danger at every turn, then it's more likely, I believe, that you're going to stumble across danger. So in this case, my personal approach to things is to walk around in the world like I am protected, like I am taken care of, like there is nothing that's going to harm me. That doesn't mean I don't use my intuition. That doesn't mean I don't pay attention and protect myself where necessary, but I don't walk around looking for the negative. And that's my point here. So if you want to travel abroad, do it because it's amazing. You gain more from the doing, the traveling and the experience than you do from staying at home and doing nothing. Plus, you also learn how to tap into your intuition even more in those situations where you can go, okay, I'm going to leave this situation now, or I'm going to go home because I think that this is getting out of control, or whatever it may be, right? You get to use those senses more and more, and you get to become more aware. And that's how you learn to take care of you. Because if you don't have a strong man who's there by your side protecting you, that's what you got to do. And that's the world that we live in today. And I would much rather have a strong man by my side protecting me. But I'm also really, really grateful that I've had all the opportunities in my life to learn how to discern for myself when I feel safe and when I don't feel safe. So this has been a really broad answer to this question. I hope I have answered it really well and that people are feeling really good about moving or traveling to a place like Italy. Of course, I'll say again, anywhere where you're going to a really big city, a really highly populated city, a city that has much more tourism. Of course, you're going to be watching out for pickpockets, for example. You're not going to put your bag on the ground and look the other way. You're going to hold it in your lap or have it strapped onto your body so that you know where it is at all times. And then, of course, in cities where there might be a higher level of homelessness, and I honestly don't know the situation in Italy, but I suspect if it's going to be anywhere, it's going to be in bigger cities like Rome, maybe Milan, maybe Napoli. But keep it positive, keep believing that you'll be safe because you will. Keep believing that you know how to listen to your intuition and keep yourself safe, and you will be fine. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Definitely come to Sardinia and try these biscotti because they're amazing, and sending you all so much love from me here in Sardinia. Ciao.